Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippe, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. I know it's been a second. I apologize for that. I kind of made one or two videos and then dipped. I work for a baseball team, so during the summer, I was completely swamped. And so I really wish I could have made more, especially Vikings content, but Minnesota sports content in general. But I am looking to get back into my normal posting schedule now that the NFL is right around the corner. But thank you so much for tuning back in. I know I went on a hiatus, but if you're still there, I appreciate you watching and listening. And if you're new, thank you so much for coming on board. So today we are going to be going over the full Minnesota Vikings predictions for the season. Obviously, I'm recording this on the 21st. It'll probably go out the 22nd or 23rd. So we know about the Harrison Phillips trade, but we do not know if there are any other plans for getting a wide receiver or any other player on the market. We're assuming the reason for dumping that salary is for that reason, but obviously there's a few things injury-wise or trade-wise or acquisition-wise that could slightly change my opinions that I make in this video, but it won't be by very much because my opinions are pretty solid in what I think about this Vikings team. So before we go over the full schedule and predict everything, let's go ahead and go through this Vikings depth chart. Obviously, the biggest question is always going to be J.J. McCarthy coming in, in his first. I mean, it's basically his rookie season. Let's be honest about that. It feels like it's his first season. Obviously, he learned a little bit behind Darnold when he was on the sidelines with that injury, but for all intents and purposes, this is his first season in the NFL. We have Aaron Jones, who, Jordan Mason was a big addition for him as that second running back. It's going to be a good change of pace situation. We'll discuss all these things in more detail as we continue on. I'm just kind of more listing it right now. Justin Jefferson, he had that hamstring injury all through camp. It might affect him a little bit in how he's able to play right out of the gate, but it's, as of right now, not supposed to keep him out of any games this season. They're saying he should be good for week one. Jordan Addison, obviously, we all know at this point, suspended. These are things I wish I would have been able to talk about throughout the offseason. It was a very eventful offseason that I wish I could have talked about more. But Jordan Addison suspended for all of his antics in previous seasons. He is going to be out the first 3 games of the season. Definitely a big factor, especially as Jalen Nailor is banged up. And there already wasn't a whole lot of solid depth. There's plenty of depth, but not a lot of solid depth as someone who could immediately step up. So we got guys like Lucky Jackson, Ty Felton, Thayer Thomas. These are guys that we would love to see in situations where we throw them out there when we're up by a lot, or guys that we were excited to see battle for a third wide receiver spot or even the top, practice squad spot, but not guys that we want to compete for the kind of roles we're looking to fill with Addison and Nailor potentially being out, which is why we are pursuing some options here leading up to the season starting. TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver, a solid 1-2 punch at the tight end position. TJ Hawkinson, a big breakout candidate for getting back to the way he has been playing in his career after kind of a rough, half season that he was back last year. And Josh Oliver has been a very consistent, second guy up and really stepped up when Hawkinson was out last year. CJ Ham, the day we get rid of CJ Ham is the day we all riot. He is going to be a Viking for life. Christian Darrisaw had a few injury bugs so far this camp. I'm not too concerned that he's going to miss any time. But we've got Darrisaw and O'Neal as the 2 guys returning who are solid tackles that are going to be the main reasons why our offensive line will hopefully be as good as it is this year. And obviously the additions are what are going to really put us ahead. We have Donovan Jackson, who we drafted in the first round this season. Obviously that one came with a little bit of people up in arms of why we reached for him. I at this point, it's one of those things where you want to trust Kwesi, but also there are some things that are kind of up in the air. The first, entire draft basically that Kwesi did, the players are all gone at this point. But I choose to still trust Kwesi in the drafting of Donovan Jackson. Looks like a great guy for us. Ryan Kelly and Will Fries are the big prizes, though. Ryan Kelly being one of those veterans that kind of had some injury issues. Will he be the same guy that he was in his prime? Absolutely not, but he certainly is a better option than Garrett Bradbury. And then we add in Will Fries, who is an absolute beast. He was another guy that had an injury, broke his leg actually last season, which is a major injury, but one that I do believe he'll bounce back on. He is kind of a younger guy, so Fries should be the X factor in the additions made to this offensive line to really shine this season. And to see Blake Brandel in the second tier of linemen and not the first is all I need to see. Then we add on here to the defense. We got Jonathan Allen kind of in the interior here. He was our big addition, super disruptive in the middle of the line. Javon Hargrave, also a big addition, and we've seen a lot of the tape with them over the offseason. They're going to be huge in kind of muddling up that middle. Jonathan Gennard and Blake Cashman returning, as well as Andrew Van Ginkel. Those are the guys that are really going to be trying to get after the quarterback. Blake Cashman, he's a guy that we have to make sure, or we hope anyway, that he is going to continue to play the way he did last year, because he was a big breakout guy that played a lot higher than what we thought his potential was. So hopefully that continues and stays consistent. Ivan Pace Jr. broke out in a big way last season, was a big reason for why some of those holes that we left were not as big as we thought they were going to be. And then we've got an addition of Isaiah Rodgers in the cornerback room. Stephon Gilmore, we got rid of him, and that's something I thought the media, it was kind of funny how the media was playing up the loss of him as if he didn't get cooked on pretty much every deep ball last season. So Rodgers, not a huge X factor, but definitely a veteran that can step up in a cornerback room. That's probably our biggest concern. As we've got Metellus and Smith kind of in our safety positions, and Mekhi Blackman also kind of in that mid-secondary. So defense looking pretty solid, as well as our offense. We'll break down now kind of what we should be expecting this season. And my biggest thing is there's a lot of people that are saying that, because of J.J. McCarthy, we're not going to be a team that is going to succeed this year, that there's going to be too much inconsistency, that McCarthy's coming off of all of his injuries and everything. My whole thing throughout this offseason has been, if you want to use McCarthy as your scapegoat for the Vikings aren't going to do well because of the inconsistencies and the concerns with J.J. McCarthy being thrown into this role, that is 100% okay. I'm not going to blame you for that. I have my own, concerns and reservations as well as my, things that I'm excited about. But that better be it, is the whole thing that I'm trying to say. Because McCarthy obviously is the outlier. How will he do? He's got a few first games where it's going to be really difficult for him. Starting off the season, Monday Night Football. You've got the fact that he is not only coming off of his injury, so he might be rusty just physically off of that. You also throw in the fact that he has not played a full competitive football game in the regular season or postseason since the championship game with Michigan. So a year and a half or more that he hasn't been on the field playing meaningful, full contact football. So that's definitely going to be a major thing. And if you want to base the success of the Vikings off of that, then that's fine. But there's a lot of people saying, oh, the offense isn't going to be as good as last year. The defense isn't going to be as good as last year. And I just don't understand that, because it feels like you're basing the losses that we had plus all of these just statistics that are based off of things that are not specific to one team is always the thing that I struggle with. I'm actually going to look up this article here, because there is an article that ESPN made, teams most likely to decline. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy is like the face of the entire article, which I just think is funny, because it's such an easy narrative. It's one that I see has merit, but it's just such an easy narrative for all of the stations and all of the outlets to say the same thing. But kind of looking at some of these statistics that they use, they said that they were a top 5 in turnovers per drive. Just 17% of the teams that finished in the top 5 did it again the following season. Average rank and turnover rate was 15th. It won't lead the league in turnovers, and based off of that one metric, we're just not going to be as good of a defense. But let's go back to this depth chart because Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave weren't on the team last year. Yes, it's true that we had a couple of losses, Cam Bynum being one of the major ones, but at the same time, I think the biggest X factor for why I feel like those concerns with the turnover margins are not quite as big of a problem as people make it out to be is because I think that that was the crutch for our secondary not being as good as other teams last year. That crutch was we could rely on those turnovers. And this season we had to find a different crutch. And I feel like Kwesi and KOC went out and found that crutch, which is not only can we get to the quarterback better, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave should completely transform our run defense. It should completely change the way our run defense runs because last season we were struggling, especially in the last couple games, stopping the run. We play in a division that is very important to stop the run. We have Josh Jacobs with the Packers. We have Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery with that 1-2 punch in Detroit. Our division is very running back heavy, and it's going to be really important to stop that in order to set ourselves up for these situations. Look at the tape for Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Obviously, a couple injury concerns. I believe they're going to get past them. And if they do, that middle interior defensive line is going to be 3 times better than it was last season. You stuff the run on first and second down, and you put this defense in a situation like Brian Flores is licking his lips at the opportunity to have more situations this year where this defense knows the other team is going to throw the ball. Like these teams are shaking at the opportunity or shaking at the chance for a 3rd and long when Brian Flores' defense knows you're going to throw the ball and are going deep with it. That is scary. And if this run defense can perform the way that it should with the additions that we made, that is going to be the major reason for why we don't need as many turnovers this year as last year. Because this year, our crutch and the thing that we're going to use to still get ahead despite our secondary issues is the fact that our run stuffing game is going to be so much better. And so those play action situations, those situations where we were stacking the box last year just to get our hands on a running back and resulting in those cornerbacks being put on islands, that's not going to have to happen as much this year as it did last year. So all that being said, I believe that the defense at the very least will be as good this year as it was last year, if not better. You throw it now to the offensive side, and obviously there's going to be some growing pains the first few weeks with Jordan Addison being out. But once Jordan Addison comes back and hopefully we make an addition where our wide receiver 3 is going to be even more improved, you've got the best, or I'm not going to say the best because people are going to be angry with me about that and say I'm biased, but at least a top 5 wide receiver 1 and 2 duo in the NFL in Addison and Jefferson. You throw in the fact that hopefully Naylor will come back, and if not, we have that 3rd wide receiver option. TJ Hawkinson continues to be one of the best tight ends in the NFL. I do believe he's going to bounce back and find his way past some of those concerns he had last season. People forget that he was hurt the entire first half, and then it's hard to come back with a team that knows the offense so well and is completely in a new situation because Darnold was in his first year with this team. So that was something that Hawkinson had to work over. He's going to be just fine going into this next season. And then you throw in the fact that we actually have an offensive line too now. We don't have to deal with all of those issues with Bradbury getting stood up at the center position. We actually have some meat in that center position at the very least, and Ryan Kelly, a very smart veteran center as well. So now he can direct things in that interior offensive line better than Bradbury did as well. Will Fries and Donovan Jackson making things happen. That sets things up more for Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, which, by the way, let's talk about that for a second. Aaron Jones looked like he was kind of running out of a little bit of gas with how much we were expecting him to do last season. Now you throw in Jordan Mason, who can be a change of pace back, who can be kind of a goal line back as well. Give Aaron Jones some rest so that he not only stays healthy but stays more fresh. This 1-2 punch is going to make this running game even better as well. So you rely a little bit more on the running game, and then you let J.J. McCarthy do his thing. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I honestly think J.J. McCarthy just needs to be a top 20 quarterback in the NFL, and we're in the playoffs. I don't care how difficult our schedule is. You look at the rest of this team, obviously, a lot of what I'm saying is more of like an on paper type thing because we don't fully know what all is going to happen. But I truly do think that every aspect of this team, pretty much, besides maybe the loss of Bynum and our our linebacker room, you can argue is like how likely is Cashman to have the same season next year as he did last year? There are a few different things that are factors there, but for the most part, I believe our defense is as good, if not better. Our offense is clearly better. If you set aside the fact that the quarterback position is kind of up in the air. So throw all those things together. McCarthy just needs to be okay, and I think this team can make the playoffs. So that all being said, I will go over this schedule here and we'll kind of see what we think about how this season is going to go. Like I said, we do have a lot of tough opponents, so we'll have to see how many wins I have the Vikings getting here. We'll start out here Monday Night Football at Chicago Bears on ESPN. This is going to be a really interesting game for both sides. You've got the Chicago Bears. They have their new coach in Ben Johnson. And you saw some of the road bumps, or is that the right word? The growing pains that have happened so far in this Bears training camp. See a lot of the frustration surrounding it. It's not typical frustration from what I've seen. It seems like it's genuinely they are having trouble grasping what Ben Johnson wants to do, all these trick plays, all of this crazy stuff. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to figure it out. It's going to be a rough first few weeks, no matter what happens, even if Caleb Williams plays well. I think that it's going to be kind of a thing where they're going to be stumbling out of the gate a little bit, just like I think the most of the NFC North will be, and I'll talk about that in just a second with some of the other teams. But I do think that it's going to be a difficult first week for the Chicago Bears. But then on the flip side of that, it's going to be rough for the Vikings as well. You've got a brand new quarterback in there. To not just be as rusty as JJ is, to not be coming off of an injury as he is, but also to be a rookie quarterback. Again, I say that in quotations, a rookie quarterback going into a hostile environment on primetime football to start out your career, that is brutal. And, no matter how bad the Bears always seem to be, Soldier Field is always very rough to play in, and it always creates close games no matter how good or bad the teams are. Just like any divisional rivalry, there's always going to be those things. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that Chicago Bears are going to win that game to start out the season. So you can put down your pitchforks, and I know I've been called biased in the past. I'm actually, believe it or not, going to pick the Bears against the Vikings in a game this season. I don't think it's because I think the Bears are going to be better than the Vikings are this season. I certainly don't think that's the case. But I do think that the Bears are going to have a little bit better go of it with their changes in that first week of the season. And obviously they have the huge home field advantage going for them in that first game. So the Vikings will fall to 0-1. All right, heading back here, a home game against Atlanta. And this is what's so crazy about it, because now J.J. McCarthy is at home, but he's got another nationally televised game. They really were brutal on J.J. McCarthy with this schedule. It is a home game, so 7:20 start on NBC. And this is going to be interesting because Michael Penix had some flashes last season, but I do still think it's going to take some time for him to really come into his own on this team and to be a real leader on this team. I think there's still some mental hurdles he has to overcome of how early he was picked in the draft and everyone saying that he isn't going to be this, he isn't going to be that. I think it's still going to take some time. Do I think he's going to get there? It remains to be even seen with that. But he certainly showed flashes last season. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say that the Vikings are able to get this win. It's going to be another close game, but I do think that this is a situation where JJ is going to feed off of those fans a little bit. He's going to learn from some of the mistakes in that first game. And, I think that the Falcons have it a little more put together in terms of the changes. They weren't as drastic. And now they can actually go into this season with a little more of a plan of this is Penix's team for the foreseeable future. They don't have to worry about it being a battle Obviously, they'll still consider both players if Penix really struggles, but I think that'll be a big benefit to them. I just think that the Vikings will be the slightly better team in this matchup, and they will win to improve to 1-1. Next up, we have 3 straight games against the AFC North, and we start things out with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this is going to be a very interesting game. I think that the Bengals, the biggest thing going for the Vikings here is that, well, one, Cincinnati really did not make very many changes to their defense to improve it. So you're really putting Joe Burrow in the exact same position he was in last season, where he had to put things together and be pretty much the full reason alongside Jamar Chase and T. Higgins for why this team still won some games last year. Now, to preview and tease a little bit, I do think the Bengals will be a much better team this year. I do expect them to be a playoff team, so that's something to expect for my division predictions video. But they always start off slow. And when a team starts off slow, like the Bengals, when you have to be firing on all cylinders on offense just to stay in a game, I think that the defense is going to be awful. JJ is going to really, jump on top of that. And I think this will be a great coming out game a little bit for JJ McCarthy. Not saying he's going to ball out after this game necessarily, but for this game, I do think he will ball out. I think there's going to be a lot of kind of tables turning with people immediately talking good about him after this game, and then it'll kind of go up and down throughout the season after that. But the main reason being, if the Vikings played Cincinnati, on November 9th, I honestly would have picked the Bengals to win. But when your defense is going to be coming out of the gate already playing poorly, but then when you're a team that starts off slow and you're already having to build up and overcome the defensive challenges, not to mention the fact that the Bengals still have not done enough to protect Joe Burrow, I do think the Vikings should get this win and improve to 2-1. Things will be going a little bit better for them. And then you've got 2 games here overseas. You play the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's going to be in Ireland. So a morning game there, then another morning game on October 5th, the very next week, in London versus Cleveland. And then you've got the bye week after that. So you've got another just brutal bye week where you have the vast majority of your schedule coming after that, especially with some of the tough stretches after that. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I can't pick these two in any other way other than it being a split, because you've got 2 defenses that are just so good. And you've got kind of interesting situations for both sides. Joe Flacco returning, being the starting quarterback to start out the year. Shedeur Sanders had one good preseason, and people are acting like he's going to be the next best quarterback, and it's just not the case. And then you've got on the Pittsburgh side, defense continues to be one of the best in the league. What did they do really to improve their offense? Aaron Rodgers comes in. He's certainly a better quarterback than the ones they've had in the past, so that is an improvement. And that's why I think it's going to be kind of the factor of he just needs to be an okay quarterback, and this team could win a good amount of games. It's still the 4th game of the season for J.J. McCarthy, still learning, still figuring things out, and with this defense being as good as it is, I think Rodgers will do just enough to get this win for the Steelers, and the Vikings will fall to 2-2 in this game. And then, like I said, I expect a split, so that means I do have the Vikings beating the Browns in that next week. They kind of were one way or the other with their additions, and I think the biggest thing here will be Joe Flacco. I think is going to continue to decline as his career comes to an end. Will he be replaced this early in the season? We're just going to have to see. But I expect this to be one of those 17-14 style games where the Vikings just edge the Browns out. So then that improves us to 3-2, going into just a brutal stretch of the season. And this is where we'll really find out if the Vikings are a playoff caliber team or not. Because we have the bye week, week 6, 3-2 going into it. We immediately play at home against the Philadelphia Eagles. Really hate ever picking the Eagles against the Vikings. We all know how much we all hate the Eagles. But I am going to say the Eagles win this game. They're as of now, as of recording this, I still think they're the best team in the NFL. Plenty of teams that have the potential to pass them over for that spot, but not a team that I think was overwhelmingly improved enough where they can be taken over right now. I think the Vikings really modeled their offseason off of how the Eagles were able to win the Super Bowl last year by, improving the battle of the trenches, improving both the offensive and defensive lines, and kind of establishing a little more of a run first offense while also having a quarterback that can get the job done. That last part is remaining to be seen about McCarthy, but that's kind of what they modeled it after. And the Eagles do it better than anyone else right now, so we have to go with the Eagles there. Then we go to Los Angeles to play a home game on the road versus the Chargers. As we all know, no one ever comes to their games. This is a Thursday night game, so it'll be the third primetime game. No one really counts the London games as being primetime, so I'm not going to. But anyway, the third primetime game of the season for the Vikings at Los Angeles. You all know that I am a Chargers fan. They're my third favorite team. I'm not like a fan, but like I tend to root for them. And I think that my judgment's been clouded in the past and picking them to be a little bit better than they end up being. Last season, I did pick them to be a playoff team when a lot of people didn't, and they ended up doing that. They still choked, but my biggest concern with this team this year is they really did not do enough to fortify this offensive line, and then Rashawn Slater got hurt. If it weren't for such a major piece of the offensive line getting hurt, I might have had a little bit higher hopes for them. And I still do have hopes that they can compete for the playoffs, but in this situation, I have to go with the Vikings over the Chargers. I think that it's going to be a good battle between Herbert and McCarthy. But I do think that with some of the challenges that they face, not to mention the fact that they did bring Keenan Allen back, but he is pretty much washed up at this point. He has some left in his career. I'm just saying he is not nearly the wide receiver he used to be. So I don't think adding him to the fleet of Lad McConkey and that's about it. That is the Chargers wide receiver room. Quentin Johnson has a lot of opportunity to improve, and if he leads up to his potential, then that could really be the X factor for this offense. But I do think that the Vikings will beat the Chargers in the 8th week of the season and improve to 4-3. But then we go to Detroit. I really don't think that we have much of a chance in this game. I don't know what a lot of these sports stations are talking about because they keep saying that the Lions are destined for this regression, and I just don't see it. There's really nothing that they lost besides their coordinators. Ben Johnson obviously is an amazing offensive coordinator, but I don't think that is the X factor for this team regressing. I think that they have the talent and they have the capability to take that offense and roll with it or design a slightly different offense and continue to have success. I don't think that losing their defensive coordinator was nearly as big of a problem as their offensive coordinator. Their defense was not great to begin with last season. And the only reason, in my opinion, that they didn't go to the Super Bowl last year was because of all the defensive injuries. People forget about all of them, the biggest one being Aiden Hutchinson, their best edge rusher, going down with an injury. I mean, that's a major factor for a team. And so you throw in the fact that, obviously the coordinator's a loss, but the rest of the team's the same. Jared Goff's still going to ball out. Jahmyr Gibbs is a top 5 running back in the NFL. Montgomery's a great, piece beside him. And you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is, again, at least a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. They have one of the best tight ends in the NFL in Laporta, and their offensive line continues to play well as well. And on the defensive side, that their offense is so good that they just need to be a pretty middle of the road defense, and this team will go far. And I think with those pieces that got hurt back in the lineup, I think that they're going to continue to play extremely well. And I think that the Vikings don't have much of a chance against that team on November 2nd. They will fall to 4-4 after that. Then they have another home game, but it's against Baltimore, which is going to be another tough game. I think that there's a lot of the way that they improved their team, the Vikings did, that can really combat a lot of the problems they were going to have against a lot of these teams. I think they solved a lot of those problems and are going to equip themselves well to win those games. I think the one thing that they didn't quite solve is the fact that a lot of what they're going to rely on is rushing the quarterback and stopping the run. But I think the thing that they haven't quite fixed is the ability to keep plays alive defensively when a quarterback gets out of the pocket and is really truly running. We can contain quarterbacks that can run, like Kyler Murray, we were able to contain last year because he went on the run and we stopped him. But quarterbacks where running is their forte, something that they do very frequently, and create those downs where you create more time, you find your receivers, that's when the Vikings are really going to struggle. Because when we have that secondary that is decent but not great, that's when those weaknesses are going to be exploited by a quarterback exactly like Lamar Jackson that can pick apart those defenses and find his way around them. We're going to have to seriously find a way to perform offensively in order to win that game, and I don't think we'll quite do that. So I do think we'll lose that game as well, and that would fall to 4-5 on the season, and it's crunch time here. But thankfully, we have a home game against the Bears, which now that it's 10 weeks into our season and we have kind of figured things out offensively, we're kind of getting in a little more of a rhythm with JJ. And now that it's not at Soldier Field, I can very confidently say we'll win this game and improve to 5-5. So then we got 3 games here that I think are really going to define how our season's going to go and whether or not we're going to make the playoffs. At Green Bay, at Seattle, at home against the Washington Commanders. People are going to be really mad at me about this, man. I'm really worried for what the comments are going to say because I do think that the Vikings will win at Lambeau Field. Now, I'm just going to say this right now. NFL on Fox, what are you doing? Because I looked at those power rankings, and when I saw that the Packers were number 5 in the power rankings, like I'm pulling up their depth chart right now, but what I think is so funny is last season and previous seasons, people talked about Jair Alexander, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. He's absolutely locking down Justin Jefferson. He's the X factor on the Packers defense, and everyone giving him so many flowers for that. Now he's gone, and people are acting like it's just not that big a deal. And I don't get it. I just don't get it. They've got Kassan Nixon, Isaiah McDuffie currently. Nate Hobbs is obviously going to be a factor for them. But what happened to Jair Alexander being Justin Jefferson's dad, and how we can't stop him and how this defense is so much better with him in it? And then people just kind of like didn't bring him up after he left. It's like, okay, so surely this defense should be rated as worse than last year. And this offense didn't get much better other than the addition of Matthew Golden, who we have no idea how he's going to do. So what about the improvements and the changes and the draft are making everyone act like they're once again a factor of they can win the NFC North? Why are people acting like they can just easily come in and win the NFC North, that they're Super Bowl favorites? I've seen people predict the Packers to be a Super Bowl favorite this year. Is there something I'm missing? Someone please tell me, because this team did not get better, and we're in a league where apparently if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, because even with the Vikings additions that they made, people are acting like they're going to lose 7 more games this season than they did last year and have this drastic fall off. So where's the line here? I feel like with the Packers, and this statement's going to make people really mad, I feel like before I say this, I will acknowledge the Vikings are not as successful of a franchise as the Packers are by a pretty wide margin. I am not using this as a way of trying to say the Vikings are better historically than the Packers. All I'm saying is there seems to be this idea around the NFL media that the Packers somehow still have this championship pedigree in them, that they have this winning culture. When in reality, the Packers won 4 championships in their history, and don't say anything about the championships before the Super Bowl, or before the Super Bowl became a thing, because those do not count for anything. Plenty of other teams won championships before that Super Bowl started. No one else brings it up like the Packers do. So you win 4 championships in your history. 2 of those happened at the very beginning when there were barely any teams that even knew how to play football. And then the other 2 happened, one with Favre and one with Aaron Rodgers. Full 35 seasons of Hall of Fame talent. And you win 1 Super Bowl with each of them, which is pretty insane to me. Obviously, again, I'm a Vikings fan. I understand we don't have Super Bowls. I understand that. I just think it's pretty wild that you go that long with 2 of the best. Both of those players could arguably be considered top 10 quarterbacks of all time by a lot of people. I'm not one of them. But you have 2 of the best quarterbacks of all time on your team. You win 2 Super Bowls in the span of 30 years. You haven't won one in 16 years or 15 years. And people act like they have the same championship pedigree as a team like the Patriots. And I think that is one of the major factors for why they're always picked to be way better of a team than they were the previous season. The Packers just won less than 11 games the last 2 years in a row, and you're picking them to win 12 games or 13 games and win the division and potentially win the Super Bowl. Like where I'm missing the part where that's something that is genuinely a possibility. Is it a possibility in the future? Yes, but I need to see that out of Jordan Love. Jordan Love has been very inconsistent. It feels like there's always a tale of 2 halves with him where he starts a game off rough and then redeems himself, or the other way around. And he's been a good leader for this team, but I haven't seen enough to say he's going to be elite anytime soon. And I think that's what they need. They need elite play out of Jordan Love in order for the Packers to extend to that next level that people think they will. Because Matthew Golden's certainly not going to do it. Losing Jair Alexander is not going to do it. So I'm just missing where that massive improvement is on this team. But anyway, I'm going to pick the Green Bay Packers to lose that game in Lambeau. We'll see if the Vikings can go for a second straight year of sweeping the Packers. Would have been 3 if Kirk Cousins didn't go down with an Achilles tear a couple years ago. So they will be in a situation where they're really battling still for their playoff hopes. Then they travel to Seattle to play the Seahawks, and once again, yearly tradition of the Vikings playing at Seattle. 3:05 game, just like it always is. And this is probably the biggest toss-up kind of game of the season for the Vikings, because you've got Sam Darnold playing in Seattle, and will it be a Keenum situation, or will he continue to ball out like he did here? And we saw the inconsistencies from him. We saw that there were times when he would rely on his top receivers. You know, Cooper Kupp moving to Seattle, it was kind of a changing of the guard where Metcalf left and Cooper Kupp is coming back in. Obviously, you can't really say that it's a 1-for-1 because they have such different styles of playing football. But we're going to have to see how that all works out. And it's really a toss-up. I do think that they made enough, or they lost enough pieces where I think that they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot kind of the same way they were last year, because I do think they made improvements as well. I am going to say the Vikings find a way to win this game, and it's going to be simply because I think that at this stage in the season, our defense is going to be firing on all cylinders. I don't think the Seahawks offensive line is going to be quite as capable of stopping it. And I think that Sam Darnold knows us very well. But if I'm betting between Sam Darnold's knowledge of us and Brian Flores' knowledge of Sam Darnold, I definitely think Flores' knowledge of Sam Darnold is going to be the prevailing factor. And I think that Darnold is going to see ghosts out there again. I think that this defense specifically, I don't think he's going to have a horrible season. But again, Brian Flores knows Darnold so well. I just don't see him having much success against this team. And so I think we'll improve to 7-5 after losing or winning in Seattle. But then the next one will be a loss, because I'm so high on the Washington Commanders this season. I said it last year. I truly thought that Jaden Daniels was going to be the very next CJ Stroud type situation, if not better. I thought that the Commanders were going to have a full turnaround, make the playoffs last season. Certainly did not expect them to be in the NFC Championship game, which just makes it more frustrating as a Vikings fan because the Commanders could just one good quarterback and boom, you're up to the top. So hopefully that happens with us and McCarthy, but we'll have to see. But yeah, I can't pick us against the Commanders. Even if Terry McLaurin leaves, I think that it's enough of an X factor. You know, Jaden Daniels being who he is, he's going to ascend to that next level. If there's any quarterback that I just cannot pick to have a sophomore slump, it's certainly Jaden Daniels. He does not have any trait that would signify a sophomore slump. He has such an ability to take any hardships and move on from it, and so I think that that'll be a loss for the Vikings. 7-6 now. So now we'll continue our tour of the NFC East. We have 3 total games in this stretch against them. We have at the Dallas Cowboys. And this is another really tough one to predict because year after year it feels like the Cowboys have been underwhelming. This year it certainly feels like they have the possibility with George Pickens to ascend to that next level. But you have to think about things from this perspective. It is the Dallas Cowboys. Do you really think that in any situation, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are going to have a amorous, connection and be a solid 1 and 2? Neither one of them are really going to care whether they're 1 or 2, right? They're not going to have egos about it. They're not going to want the ball more. They're not going to throw tantrums when they don't get the ball, right? It's not going to work out in Dallas. It wouldn't really work out, in my opinion, in very many places at all, but it's certainly not going to work out in Dallas. If there's any place where there's going to be turmoil in the locker room, George Pickens is not going to work out in Dallas. I truly don't think so. Dak Prescott, he continues to just be on his climb where he just does this. He's so slightly on an incline and continues to get better as a quarterback. He is a good quarterback, don't get me wrong, he's solid, but I don't think he'll ever be elite. And with the kind of turmoil and constant turnaround and locker room issues, defensive turnaround, Micah Parsons might not be there anymore, which will be another reason why I don't think they'll succeed much of this season. I just don't see the Cowboys playing well this year, and if there are going to be major problems in the locker room, if there are going to be if there is going to be a major devolution in this team, it's certainly going to be at full effect by the time the Vikings play them. So I do think they'll get this win and improve to 8-6 on the season. And we're not going to waste much time on this. I think they'll beat New York as well. The second straight year they'll be in New York in an away game, this time towards the end of the season instead of at the beginning of the season. But I feel like it really could be anybody at quarterback at this point for the New York Giants. Russell Wilson will most likely be in there all season long. But Jackson Dart is not the kind of guy that I think is going to immediately ascend. I don't think Wilson's going to play quite bad enough for him to even get an opportunity. Will Dart even be the quarterback 2 by that time? I don't even know if that's true. But I don't think this New York team is good enough. I think they'll have a good enough season where there'll be some positivity, but I don't think they're going to have much of a chance against the Vikings at this stage. 9-6, but then you have to play the Detroit Lions again. It's a home game. It's on Christmas, but I do think the Lions will have enough on the line at this point still. I think they'll be still fighting for the 1 seed or maybe the 2 seed at this stage. They might be trying to wrap up the division still, and if they are, I think they will in this game. I think the Lions will sweep the Vikings this season, and it'll be a rough game where it'll be close at times. I think it'll be a lot like the games that we played against the Lions this last season, and I think they're going to be just a little bit better than us this season, or not a little bit, a good amount better, as J.J. McCarthy continues to try and battle to be at the top of this division. It'll be a couple years before he gets to that point. But that leads to, gosh, people are going to be so angry with me because I genuinely, when I thought about this for the first time, I did not think about how I was going to have to be viewed as biased in making this decision, because I truly do think, this is my bold prediction, this game, Week 18 versus the Green Bay Packers, I think the loser is out of the playoffs. Both teams go in my opinion, at 9-7. I think the Packers have their typical up and down season. Jordan Love will be considered the best quarterback in the league by the media, apparently, after having another decent season. And I think both teams will be 9-7 going into this game. And I think that this is a strong enough conference in the NFC where I honestly think that 9-8 isn't going to make the playoffs this year. And so I think it'll be either battling for either the 6th or the 7th seed for this final game of the season. But at the end of the day, if I pick them in Lambeau, I'm going to pick the Vikings to win at home against the Green Bay Packers. I just don't think they have quite enough. I don't think so. And this is going to be the same when I posted that video about the Bears last season, saying that they weren't going to have a good season, and people told me off and said I didn't know what I was talking about, and I ended up being right. It's going to be the same situation this year. I'm going to get a lot of crap for this on social media. Do I dare clip this? I guess we'll find out. But I do think the Vikings will beat out the Packers and make the playoffs at 10-7. Since the offseason started, I had them as a 10-win team. We made the improvements we did. I still think they're a 10-win team because I think that we made massive improvements that are going to put us ahead of that point, but I don't think that it's going to be quite enough of an improvement where we can get over some of these teams like the Ravens, the Lions, or the Commanders. I think that we're still not quite there, but I do think we're going to have a very solid season. McCarthy is going to show enough signs to show that he is going to be our quarterback of the future. Like I said, this team is so stacked around him that he just needs to show up and compete and play pretty well and be decent in order for this Vikings team to be successful this season. So let me know in the comment section what you think about this. I think this is going to be a very divided comment section because this really is a toss-up year for the Vikings. At the end of the day, McCarthy could completely tank. He could play like a top 10 quarterback. But I do think, I will say, I feel like his floor is a lot higher than people think it is. Because this whole time, people have been saying that he's mid, he's a handoff merchant, a check down merchant. But even in that context, he's going to get the ball to people. Like, he is not the kind of quarterback that is going to be overwhelmed by the situation he's in. At the very least, he's going to be an overly conservative quarterback, a lot like Kirk, that just dumps the ball off and gets it to people. But with the player makers we have on this team, with the running game that we're going to have this year, and with the offensive line improvements, I genuinely don't see how McCarthy doesn't at least bring this team to 9 or 10 wins this season. We're going to have to see if I'm right, because it is for sure a tough schedule, and some things that I said are going to go the Vikings' way could easily go the other way, but also we could pull off some upsets against some of these better teams as well. So I think 10 wins is a pretty fair prediction for this team, but let me know in the comment section what you think. I'm going to continue to come out in the next couple weeks with, like I said, full season division predictions for the entire NFL. I'll come out with my quarterback tier list and all of that.